Joining us on the podcast today, we've got Bo Brack from Locked On Cardinals. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing great. Arizona Cardinals, lone undefeated team. Just a big, emphatic win over the Cleveland Browns without their head coach, without their starting center, without one of their top defenders. Man, life is good. And then the Texans coming to town. It's looking pretty good for 7-0.
Yeah, I was going to say good time to be an Arizona Cardinals fan right now. You already mentioned you're the last remaining undefeated team in the NFL. So you're atop the mountaintop alone right now. Is this a sort of just a pleasant surprise for Cardinals fans? Or could you guys kind of see the seeds of this offensive outbreak coming in the offseason that maybe some of the other analysts or people who don't pay close attention to this team might have overlooked?
No, I don't think anybody overlooked this. I mean, if you even the most optimistic Cardinals fan knew that, a lot had to go great. You had to have some lucky breaks. They had a missed field goal at the end of the game against the Vikings that it would have been a loss, no doubt about it. And then, you had some injuries, key injuries to the Browns the last week. And not to say that would have changed that game, but it would have been a little bit tighter. And the Arizona Cardinals were 28th against the rush, and they were without Nick Chubb in that contest. But it's these seasons, and we see it at least each and every year with one team where they get, things come together, players develop, some veterans that you thought didn't have anything left in the tank. They have kind of a career resurgence, and then you get those lucky breaks. You get those missed kicks. You get the footballs. It's oblong. It doesn't bounce, directly, up or down. You don't know which direction it's going to go, but the Arizona Cardinals have certainly gotten their fair share of bounces early on. And it's just, everything seems to be going the way of the Arizona Cardinals, but that's not to say, hey, are they better lucky than good? They're very good. There's a lot of talent on this roster. So I was kind of confused when I would see that the Cardinals were the odds-on favorite to be the last team in the NFC West. There's so much talent on this roster, up and down. And it really came down to if the stars could play like stars, stay healthy, and some of the young players could develop like Isaiah Simmons, could they hit on some of their draft picks? And all of that has pretty much happened. Zaven Collins hasn't played that much, but for the most part, everything has happened. AJ Green has had a career resurgence, and he's been that outside receiver opposite DeAndre Hopkins that they needed, so the other wide receivers could run. So it looks really good. And then the biggest question, to be honest with you, was with Cliff Kingsbury. Could he show in his third season that he belonged at the NFL level and he wasn't overmatched? And the playmaking's been there. I mean, when they plucked him off of from USC, and after he was fired from his alma mater at Texas Tech in the same offseason, when you hire that guy, you take that risky experimental move. This is what you envision. I mean, the offense is just rolling right now. So yeah, it's nobody envisioned 6-0. I don't think anybody envisioned 7-0, even though we envision it now. But yeah, not at the beginning of the season. Not with games against the Titans, not games against the Rams, not games against the Browns, 3 playoff teams from the previous season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, a huge factor has obviously been Kyler Murray under center, making a huge step forward, kind of reminiscent a little bit of Josh Allen in that sort of third year, age 24 season where everything started to sort of click for him. I mean, he goes out, he's got career highs in completion percentage, yards per attempt, yards per catch, yards per game, like just all blowing everything out of the water. Like, what have you noticed just maybe has changed in his approach to the game that was different from the 2020 version of Kyler Murray that we saw last year?
Yeah, I mean, he's a rising junior. How did you feel your junior in high school? You just felt a little bit more comfortable. You walked with your chest a little higher. You knew your surroundings. You had your friends group. You knew what to expect. And I think that's the difference, because Kyler really hadn't experienced that his entire life. He'd always been kind of, even though he's tiny for a quarterback, he's big man on campus. He's always been. He's won at every level. So he's not surprised by this. This is how he's navigated his entire life. He's been a winner. He's been the big dog. And, but he has taken it. I think Josh Allen's the perfect comp. He's really this incredible skill set that he's just put it all together in his year 3. Now, like, the ceiling's always been there. Like in year 2, people thought, oh, he could take that Mahomes, Lamar Jackson type leap. But those expectations are really rough to put on a young guy like that. It's like it might have happened in back-to-back seasons where Mahomes throws for 50 touchdowns and Lamar Jackson has the year he did and they win MVP. But Kyler Murray he's done it more kind of linear, where he's gone, Heisman Trophy winner, He's gone NFL rookie offensive player of the year, 37 total touchdowns last year, knocking on the playoff door. And now this year he's kind of kicking that door in, and it's been impressive. And I think, the biggest thing is his poise and his grasp of this offense and having those playmakers, 4 wide receivers. They just added Zach Ertz, 5 guys who can catch the ball. And then you add Chase Edmonds coming out of the backfield, and then kind of a guy that you can run between the tackles, and James Conner. He's got an embarrassment of riches right now. And the offensive line has kept him relatively unscathed. It's just everything is kind of just firing right now. And Kyler Murray's taking advantage of it. And he's taking some easier passes. He's not taking as many risks, and he's taking kind of he had a 67% completion percentage last year. He's taking it to the next level, 75, because he's just taking what the defense is giving him.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you just hit on some great points there too. And he's even as like an outside observer who's only caught maybe 1 or 2 actual Cardinals games this year on television, like that's something that stood out to me as well too, is just his poise in the pocket. And he seems to be more comfortable in the offense. He seems to hold on to the ball a little bit longer, wait for a play to develop rather than just immediately taking off and using that athleticism that's gotten him to this point in his career. Like, even if you look at the numbers, last year he was averaging something like 50 yards a game. This year it's down to 19 rushing yards per game.
Yeah.
Like, is that, do you think, more a result of the coaching philosophy and the organizational philosophy that they are trying to groom a little bit of that take off and run mentality out of him and become more of a passer? Or is it just because he, as you mentioned, now has an embarrassment of riches in terms of the weapons around him, that he is putting more of an emphasis on beating you with his arm?
Yeah, he's really turned his ability to get out and run into a luxury. And he wants to, and you kind of see this through the maturation of any athletic quarterback, scrambler, whatever you want to call it, where at some point in their career, there's an offense coordinator, there's a head coach that says, hey, you would be better off if you could be more of a pocket passer. And then when things collapse, then get out and utilize your athleticism. And we're seeing that kind of with Kyler, but with the poise too, is he's using his athleticism to get out of harm's way, but he's keeping his eyes downfield. And with that, he's just getting himself to where he's not going to take a sack, and he can still make a play down the field, instead of he was kind of running around with his chicken with his head cut off, where he was just trying to avoid getting hit. And that's really been a big difference. But, he had 6 yards rushing against the Browns, 1 yard against the San Francisco 49ers. We're talking about 7 yards in 2 weeks from Kyler Murray. I don't think I would have ever envisioned that. And it's just like, you got a high priced luxury sports car, and it's got Tesla's got the sicko mode. You don't have to go 0 to 60, but if the opportunity ever rises, he can do it. And it's just turned into kind of that, where he doesn't have to rely on it. It's not part of the offensive game plan like the Ravens have with Lamar Jackson, but it's a luxury that if things break down, he can get out and run. And he's lethal in the red zone. That's still a big part of his game, even though he hasn't found the end zone in the last 3.
Yeah. Well, again, embarrassment of riches offensively. And full disclosure, as an Eagles fan here, I know exactly what you're getting in terms of Zach Ertz. Like,
yeah,
you go and you add a tight end like that after Williams goes down to injury. How do you sort of see him getting worked into the offense? Because obviously, Ertz, a couple years removed from his record-setting reception season, wasn't the same pass-catching threat out of the downfield that he had been in previous years in Philadelphia. So do you think he's going to be a focal point of that offense, like 7-8 targets a game, or is he mostly going to be utilized in the red zone?
Yeah, if he becomes a red zone threat, what they're able to do already in the red zone, and we've seen kind of an uptick as far as their success. I think that it becomes the rich get richer there. There's one football. That's the biggest problem with somebody like that. But no, I think that Max Williams was such a great run blocker. And I mean, that's not Zach Ertz's game. So I don't know how it's going to look, because we haven't seen historically in the Arizona Cardinals, they've never invested in a playmaking tight end. They just haven't had it. I don't know why it's been around for so long. And the Arizona Cardinals have been either stubborn, or they just missed on guys that they thought could be that playmaking tight end. And so it's gonna be the first time in a long time. I think they had Todd Heap at the end of his career, but Zach Ertz, I honestly don't know. I don't know what to expect. I mean, you know what he can do playmaking wise, but can he match what Max Williams could do as far as opening up rush lanes? That's important for this offense. So I'm not sure. I think that he can. Max Williams, who's not a playmaker at all, benefited from being kind of the lost guy by the defense, and he was just open. And then he took the smallest, shortest strides I've ever seen, not athletic. And he was having a career year before he went down. I mean, he had just under 200 yards receiving, which is about his career mark, and matched his career total with a touchdown. So, I think Zach Ertz can get that in a week. He get to get that in 2 weeks. And if he does, that's just on top of what these receivers are doing. That's all he has to do. He doesn't have to be 1,000-yard tight end receiver again. But I mean, if it's what's crazy, if he approaches 500 yards, he'll approach like the greatest receiving season for a tight end in Cardinals history. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you're mentioning it, I literally cannot name you any like fantasy football relevant tight end that I can think of out of Arizona in all of these years. Like who would be on the Mount Rushmore of Arizona tight ends even?
Talk about the saddest Mount Rushmore of all time. Probably there was Freddie Jones in the early 2000s. And then there was Rob Hausler for like 2 seasons. I think he was over 400 yards each year. And then like it gets Leonard Pope. It's really sad. It's just this Ricky Seals Jones was in there for a couple games, and that's how bad it is. Ever since they moved to the desert, there hasn't been anybody that has played the tight end as far as a playmaking tight end ever. So, it's pretty that's one of the worst Mount Rushmores for sure.
Yeah, there you go. All those household names. Well,
yeah.
I mean, if you look across the locker room, though, at least their wide receiver group does have some household names there for sure. I mean, you've got Hopkins, you've got Green, Kirk, Rondale Moore, and Andy Isabella. Like with so much depth there. Are we just now finally starting to see Cliff Kingsbury access that full playbook that he really was unleashing at, Texas Tech and all of that? Like, which wide receiver has maybe been the most impressive through the first 6 weeks to you?
I mean, I'll give the most impressive wide receiver. Just name it, DeAndre Hopkins. But I don't. That would be boring if everybody knows how good of a receiver Nuke is. But as far as who's really kind of surprised and flashed in 2021, Rondale Moore, the 2nd round pick, because you mentioned a guy who's a 4-letter word around the desert, and it's Andy Isabella. And Christian Kirk was a guy with consistency issues, and those were guys that they utilized the second round picks in, and they didn't step up to where they needed them a wide receiver to be, and Rondale Moore has. And he's just, the thing is, he's in a really comfortable position as a rookie coming out of the Big Ten at Purdue, and really utilizing his speed. He really looks like a Kyler Murray wide receiver version. He's short, he's stocky, he's fast, he goes east and west quick, but if he gets going north and south, man, look out. I really like Rondale Moore's game, but what sets that up is just AJ Green playing that outside receiver position, and guys like Christian Kirk, who moved to the slot, is having a ton of success there in a contract year, and then Rondale Moore underneath and kind of being able to move him around, and then DeAndre Hopkins being that wide receiver one on the outside. It's just a great setup, and AJ Green having good numbers and has been equally as impressive as Rondale Moore at his age and coming off of what people thought he was done. He's in the conversation for sure, but just what he does in creating opportunities for the younger guys is equally as important.
Yeah, obviously something going on in the water down there in Arizona, because it doesn't matter whether it's football or basketball or hockey or whatever. It just seems that these aging veterans go down there towards the end of their careers, and I don't know, maybe it's the sunshine and the golf courses, but they seem to hit an extra gear and one last chapter in their career.
Right. Well, they had Larry Fitzgerald, who had a career resurgence about AJ Green's age, and it's like, it doesn't happen. That's the exception, right? They can't do it twice, and here he is. He's having a great year.
Yeah. Well, Chase Edmonds, James Conner, they form a nice little 1-2 punch in that backfield. Very different skill sets, though, right? James
Mhm.
Conner is more of their goal line threat, sort of pounded in the red zone. Chase Edmonds does a little bit of everything. You can catch out of the backfield. Do you see either one of them really ever at any point this season becoming that sort of three down back, really grabbing that starting role and running with it? Or do you think the Cardinals are just happy with the balance that they've got between those two?
Yeah, very content, I think, with that balance, the latter there. I thought at the beginning of the year that if one of those guys was going to grasp the RB1 role and run away with it, it'd be Chase Edmonds, but he just hasn't. I mean, and he's had, it's not for him not having big games, but he's had, his big runs have been in positions where he can get outside and around the offensive line in kind of the zone run blocking scheme and be successful and utilize his speed, right? And he's been very impressive in doing that. And it's been more kind of quality over quantity with his success there. And I think that's his game. He's just not built to kind of take the wear and tear as a bell cow running back. But then on the other side of that, James Conner has been he hasn't the last two seasons, he hasn't been healthy. He's finally healthy. And it's because the Arizona Cardinals have done a good job in utilizing him in just kind of those short yardage situations. And like within the 3 yard line, I think he's 4 for 4 and punching it in on carries from the 3 yard line and in for touchdowns. And that's just with Kyler Murray there. And you can either use him as a decoy or boot him or whatever. James Conner gives them a pretty easy guy to just hand the ball off to and punch it in.
Yeah. Well, especially with this blistering start and the fact that they're putting up, 37 points on the board seemingly every other week there. Like, do you think that the defensive side of the Arizona Cardinals is getting a little bit overlooked? Because if you look at their actual metrics, I think they're like 6th against the pass. I think they're more middle of the pack against the run right now. So that's maybe one area that could get cleaned up. But overall, just yards per game, 10th in the league, which if you look at their defense in past years, certainly wasn't the case there. Like, what's really changed this year defensively for them?
It's a big combination of a lot of things. And they've given up the second least amount of points in the NFL, just behind Buffalo. And JJ Watt, his leadership, his ability to be disruptive beyond the box score, he's really brought that to this team. And that nonstop motor is something that him and a guy like Marcus Golden, who's another pass rusher, they bring it each and every down. And then when Chandler Jones is in there outside of week 1, the sack totals haven't been there. He had 5 in the first week and 1 since. It's been those guys making the opposing quarterback uncomfortable, getting off their spot, getting them out of the pocket, and making kind of mistakes. And this hasn't been an opportunistic defense for the last couple of years. I think they were only behind Detroit since 2018 as far as forcing interceptions. And this year they're forcing tons of turnovers. They're getting about a pick a game. And Byron Murphy's emerged as a cornerback 1, kind of becoming a household name. So it's a mix between the veteran stars on that defense, being those stars and playing like stars, JJ Watt, Chandler Jones, Budda Baker, and Jordan Hicks being kind of a veteran presence in the linebacking core, and young guys like Byron Murphy Jr., Isaiah Simmons emerging and playing at a high level and adding that speed and that athleticism. And it's a dangerous combo. And it's just been the right recipe. I think that I think teams in the last couple of weeks are like 2 for 10 on 4th down, just an absurd number. And it's just a good mix of play calling on the defensive side and guys executing and doing their job. And you don't get that without a good mix of veterans and athleticism.
Yeah. And I mean, you just mentioned him there, Chandler Jones, bit of an interesting story there because he was not the happiest of campers in the offseason. Yeah. Suddenly they bring in JJ Watt. They're off to a 6-0 start, probably going to 7-0 this weekend against the Texans. Like, what's just even the latest update around his situation as it pertains to maybe his future in the desert beyond this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. It's a bit polarizing. But it's not anything beyond an agent and a player trying to just kind of posture for the best deal they can get. If they can get guaranteed money now, why not do it now? So they were just playing whatever card they had left in their deck. And that was in the preseason and training camp. And that was just kind of their Hail Mary and an attempt at an extension. So he didn't have to kind of go into a contract year and not have any kind of, security, financial security, if that's fair to say. And then he has the massive game to open up the season and has come back down to earth. I think the Arizona Cardinals just ride this one out. And at his age, Chandler Jones, 32 years old, are going to be 32 in the offseason. It's just, I think it'd be a bad business move for the Cardinals to extend him right now, give him a ton of money, because you don't know what his market is. And I just don't know if there's a long list of guys at his age that, continue, that you're not going to pay them for previous performance. So it's going to be interesting. It just has to make sense for the Arizona Cardinals, and they're not short on pass rushers. So I think for the Cardinals, it's probably their best move to just ride this one out. I don't think it's the same as Patrick Peterson last year, where Patrick Peterson was over 30 and his performance had kind of fallen off a cliff. And there was really no sense for them to sit down and negotiate a new contract. They needed to see what the market would look like. And if anything made sense to bring him back, they would go to work on a new contract. But it's just kind of where they are. But I don't think that there's anything like Chandler Jones is just this unhappy guy. I mean, he's still being paid handsomely. If he continues to play well, he's going to make himself a lot of money. And if he has a good year, it's good for both parties.
Yeah. Well, Jones, Watt, Baker, obviously some star power on that defensive side of the football. Mm-hmm. And obviously, when you've got that kind of star power, you're probably going to generate a lot of headlines, and a lot of the focus is and praise is going to be heaped onto you there. But who is really a under the radar, sneaky good guy who might not be getting a lot of the recognition, but is just a linchpin towards that defense and just seems to be making play after play after play?
Yeah. There's actually a couple of them, but it just depends. I mean, I could name off a couple of guys, and Buda Baker, obviously, but I think he's in the conversation as a top 5 safety in the league, tackling machine. He's added kind of the coverage skill to his game in the last year and a half. But I think the biggest cog in this whole thing is Isaiah Simmons, 8th overall pick, 2020, and he was just absolutely drinking out of a fire hose his rookie season. Pandemic year, didn't get any like the mandatory mini camps, the OTAs, nothing. Coming out of Clemson, he's the Swiss Army knife. So he was learning 6 positions his rookie year, and it just wasn't resonating with him. He wasn't comprehending, Vance Joseph, his defense. And then in year 2, you've really seen it. I mean, a guy that he's led the team in tackles several weeks. He's got a pick here. He's a guy that was 6'4", 240, ran a sub 4.40. I mean, he's an absurd athlete, and he plays with power as well. I've seen him, just stonewall Derrick Henry on the goal line. Trey Lance, a big quarterback, on the goal line. And then last week against Anthony Schwartz, who ran a 4.25 40, wide receiver out of Auburn, he's stopping in the open field. So he's got that size that's in power and speed. And it's just an absolute weapon to have with those other big names that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Well, as an Eagles fan, I can't relate to having any kind of depth at the linebacker position there. And so, I mean, it's just an embarrassment of riches that you guys seem to have, but anything can really happen when you're playing in the NFC West, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's a buzzsaw of a division. We already mentioned you got the Texans this weekend. I think everyone and their grandmother's probably taken Arizona if you haven't already taken them in your survivor pools and all of that to cover. So let's assume they get to 7-0. Just looking ahead to the schedule that they've still got, if they are going to drop a game in the next couple and finally get that first loss of the season, what game do you see that being? Like, what team do you think matches up with them pretty well and could give them a run for their money?
Yeah, I mean, a week from Thursday Night Football, it's the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers are a team that's going to come to town. Last time I saw Aaron Rodgers at State Farm Stadium, the guy was throwing back-to-back Hail Marys and completed them for over 100 yards of offense in like 2 plays. It was unreal. I've never seen anything like it in person. And with Aaron Rodgers and that Packers team, I know that they're not, people are kind of down after their first week performance, but they've rebounded. It's still a 1-loss team and could come in and beat the Cardinals. That's probably the first one that stands out to me. And then after that, they have to go on the road to take on a San Francisco 49ers team in Santa Clara. And the 49ers just played some grinded out, gritty defense against the Arizona Cardinals team. And it really just threw them off their game. And they had to win this one. They took out Trey Lance a couple of weeks ago, 17-10. And if they could turn it into another game like that, it being on the road this time, and maybe if Jimmy G's in there and that raw offense is running a little bit better, more efficient, I don't think the Arizona Cardinals could survive a regular season game like that. It'd be tough. It would show some resilience. It would be a great test for them. And then once you get around that, Then they've got games against like Carolina and Detroit. And then you're looking at after their bye week, I think in week 14, Monday Night Football against the Rams. That's probably the next game that we'd be like, okay, we'll see. That's probably a coin flip, if not really in heavy favor of the Rams at that point. We'll see how they're playing by then.
Yeah. If you were to try and pinpoint whether it's offensively, defensively, just one area that still needs to improve. And it's going to be hard to do because they're firing on all cylinders early season here. But what's that one area that you're still not sold on in terms of the Arizona Cardinals game to become a true Super Bowl contender, not just a good regular season team?
I think it would surprise everybody, but it's the offense, because through 9 games last year, the offense was playing at a high level. It was. And I don't think anybody was kind of sold on it then. I think we're a little bit more sold on it now. It looks more efficient. It looks more crisp. Looks like guys know exactly what they're supposed to be doing. And you see the playmaking from everyone. You can kind of see that become sustained throughout the rest of the season. But, you know, it's going to come down to, can they, when NFL defenses, and they always do, it's inevitable, they catch up to what you're doing offensively. And that game of chess happens. Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, unlike last year, can they win that game of chess, or at least keep up with it to keep that offense rolling enough to put up the points that they need necessary to really contend in the NFL? I think that's the biggest question, because I think that the guys, especially the leadership on this team, most of it lies on the defensive side. Like, as far as the guys who are going to be in it between the ears, you've got those guys, especially with JJ Watt. So I have more trust in the defense right now, and that offense, the consistency is going to be key down the stretch.
Yeah. Well, Bo, we appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us today. For those that are listening, though, that want to either check out your podcast or any of your articles or content or whatever it is you're putting out into the universe, like, where are the best places to find you these days?
Yeah, for sure, man. It's my daily podcast. I do it with the co-host. His name's Alec Clancy, and we hang out. We talk about the Arizona Cardinals. It's called the Locked On Cardinals podcast. You can find it at any podcast provider: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, Stitcher. Or we're now on YouTube, so you can see our ugly mugs while we're talking about the Cardinals. And you subscribe to our YouTube content, get the alert, and every time we post a show on a daily basis, we premiere at 10 a.m. in the Pacific. You can check us out. We appreciate that. And just follow me on Twitter at BOBRACK if you don't want to be overrun with Cardinals content. But that's the easiest way to find it. And then Mondays, I'm doing Locked On NFL. It's just a national kind of spin around the league after that Sunday's week of action.
Beautiful. Well, that, as you say, probably an easier one this weekend. We'll see if you can get past the lowly Houston Texans. Next Thursday, going to be a big one, but we'll see how they do. Kyler Murray and the boys are definitely looking good. So best of luck to you guys down in the desert.
Yeah, thanks. And I hope the Eagles figure it out. I really would like the Jalen Hurts experiment to see a couple other seasons. It could be a fun project for them.
Yeah, no, I'm a believer in the Jalen Hurts experience, the Nick Sirianni experience.
Oh boy,
that's a whole other kettle of fish right there. So we'll see how much longer of a leash he gets in the city of brotherly love.
Right. Well, if he gets a Howie Roseman leash, he's going to be there for a while.
Yeah, no, my biggest fear right now, truly, as an Eagles fan, is if the Dolphins and the Colts keep tanking and the Eagles season comes off the rails, like, we need to get rid of Howie, because I do not trust him with 3 top 10 draft picks in the same draft. It's going to somehow get packaged up for like a kicker or something. I don't know.